All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Angie Braley, and I'm the River Training Center Coordinator for River Management Society. And this is our first of 4 webinars about landing your dream river career or building your dream river career, kind of all the different pathways and little tips and tricks for having a career related to rivers. So in some of our other sessions, we're going to be looking at different conferences and associations you can join, some skills or certifications that can enhance your employability. And our last session is going to be uh, around emerging trends and future opportunities to just help you stay ahead in this evolving field. However, today we're going to be kind of focusing in on navigating the complexities of federal employment. And so we're going to look at some of the different agencies that work with rivers. It's not a comprehensive list at all. This is just a few. And we're going to look at some different tips for navigating through USA jobs and kind of break down some acronyms. But really encourage you all to put any questions you have in the chat or any tips that you might have to share. I know some of you who are joining might have a federal job, but you're just looking how to augment it. So you might also have some tips to share. So please, please, please share, network away. And now I'm going to pass it over. We've got 3 guests today who are going to be joining, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We'll go ahead and have Tangi introduce herself, and then we'll go to Lee and then Hannah.
Thank you, Angie. Hi, everybody. I'm Tangia Cassio too. I'm representing the USDA Forest Service. I work with our National Wilderness and Wild and Scenic Rivers staff. So those are 2 different national scale systems of lands and rivers that are managed by a number of agencies, including the Forest Service. So I work with our team at the national scale at the Washington office in DC, which is the headquarters. And yeah, I've worked with Angie on a number of occasions to talk about professional development opportunities and different pathways. And I personally was a resource assistant, which is like similar to an internship program that comes with really specific benefits and opportunities with different land managing agencies. And so I can speak from that perspective and what it's like to take a step from that to potentially a permanent position with a federal agency. But I'm going to stop there and we'll have the opportunity to cover a number of other things today. So I'll pass it back to you, Angie.
Thanks, Tangi. All right. How about Lee?
Hi, my name's Lee. Can you see me? I don't.
Yep.
That's like okay. That's cool. I don't have to see myself. Anyways, hi, my name's Lee. I work for the Bureau of Land Management as their partnership lead for BLM California. I grew up in the back east, kayaking on the Potomac in West Virginia, and worked as a guide and instructor for a long time. Got into outdoor rec planning and restoration work out in the desert. And it took me 9.5 years to get into the federal service. So that's one of the things that I try to help others with is help shorten that time period because not everyone can spend 9.5 years taking internships, going back to grad school and everything like that. I was fortunate enough to have my husband housing me and feeding me. So I'm like, okay, let me take everything that I've learned and try to share that with as many folks as possible. So in my last job, I was the National Conservation Lands Lead for the California Desert District, where we were working on 4 wild and scenic river planning efforts, as well as a bunch of other different conservation programs. Whereas in my current job, I get to help coordinate with folks, NGOs, volunteers, and youth programs. So I'm really involved in the intern program and trying to help get folks into the federal government. I don't know if y'all have heard, but there's a lot of folks who are retiring. So there's more opportunities to actually get into federal service these days. So I want to help with that. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Lee. All right, Hannah.
Thanks, Angie. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Volk. I'm a hydropower fellow with the National Park Service. Before this position, I was also a fellow with the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers program, which is a type of wild and scenic river that's mostly found in the Northeast region. I'm located based in Concord, New Hampshire. I've been working with the Park Service as I said, my second fellowship here now. And so I'm also in the position of really, really hoping to get into a federal position more permanently. It's also been a really great experience to be a fellow and have the opportunity to learn about the ins and outs of different programs that way. And there's a lot of great opportunities in this position as well. So my work most now is working on GIS and communications for the Hydropower Assistance Program. And the Hydropower Assistance Program helps applicants who are looking at developing hydropower projects go about that process in a way that's respectful of conservation and recreation. So yeah, I'll be talking a little bit more about my experience as a fellow, and I'm hoping to learn some things here today too. So that'll be great. So thanks. Back to you, Angie.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you all so much for joining and sharing your experiences and knowledge with us. So just to kind of like start things off, I've got just like a slide here with some fun pictures about from the Forest Service, and just gonna invite Tangi just to speak a little bit about like kind of just like, like the overview of the agency. I know, there's different regions and maybe some different river programs or career progressions and paths in the Forest Service. So
Yeah, thanks for the visual. That's very cute. I hadn't even seen all of these photos, so this is lovely. But yeah, I'd be happy to provide an overview of river-related work within the context of the Forest Service. But first, I want to start with a little bit of context. Each land managing agency has slightly different missions and sort of ethics around words like conservation or protection or management. And so for a little bit of context around the Forest Service specifically, it actually began more around the concept and activity of like timber reserves and more of an extractive type of practice. And so that's why the Forest Service actually lives within the United States Department of Agriculture, which is slightly different than the Department of Interior, where some of the other land managing agencies receive their guidance and missions. And so that's kind of one key piece to remember, because although the Forest Service has a number of programs that have to do with concepts around protection or conservation, we have a lot of other activities and multiple uses that happen on Forest Service lands, including, mining and mineral activity and recreation, and we still have a timber industry. And so the Wild and Scenic Rivers program sort of fits into a unique side of the Forest Service. So to give you a little bit of an overview, we do have a couple different branches of how the agency functions. And so that includes the National Forest System. And so that's where all of the programs that have to do with different jurisdictions on the forest and different kinds of resources live, and they work together. There's a spectrum of resources on the forests, from wildlife to recreational opportunities and waterways and all kinds of things. So another really strong branch of the Forest Service is our research and development folks. And so that branch does house quite a few folks. If you're more looking for an ologist type position, or you like research or doing monitoring or potentially field work, some of those opportunities live within our research and development branch of the Forest Service, where we have aquatic specialists and a couple other programs that do work on rivers and watersheds. In addition to that, if you're more into the realm of like connecting with the public and serving the needs at the state and private level, and also work with tribal nations. We have a branch that's dedicated to state, private, and tribal forestry. And then we also have an international programs branch as well. So within the National Forest System, which was the first one I highlighted and is probably our biggest branch, that's where my program lives, Wilderness and Wild and Scenic Rivers. And so there's positions at each level of the Forest Service, which operates as somewhat of a hierarchy. So we have a national headquarters, and then there's also regional offices, which represent somewhat of like a eco region, but you know, there's historical reasons for why they are where they are. So there's 9 regions represented here. You might notice where is Region 7? It was absorbed some time ago with the reorganization. So we've got these regional offices who coordinate with forests. So then at the forest level, that's where you have forest supervisors who are key decision makers and bridges to the public to make sure that they tailor all of their work to serve the needs of the surrounding public and the unique history of any given forest. And then within the forest, you have the smallest jurisdiction, which is called the district. And so there are also leadership roles and decision-making roles at the district level. And working at a district level, typically that means you're the closest to working in the field or working directly on the resource. So if you are working in the field level, it really matters the location that you're looking at. Not every district has some kind of river manager. It really depends on the key activities and priorities and location of any given forest, what kind of river managing activities are going on. And so if you want to identify position opportunities, the best thing to start with is location. So making considerations about different designated rivers or looking at regions where there's a lot of activity around managing water resources. And so at that level, the last note that I'll make is that not every position is labeled as a river-specific position. Oftentimes, work can be done under the umbrella of a job that might be called like a recreation job. Recreation means a lot of things because there's so many different places that you can recreate on the forest, but one of which can be rivers on any given district. So sometimes that's where you'll find opportunities to engage directly with the resource. And then outside of that, you have some of the other ologist type positions who might be taking inventories or doing monitoring or maybe planning restoration related projects to restore wetlands or other relevant ecosystem types on any given forest. And so I will pause there and just reiterate that location is how you can determine where river related work is done. And it's important to identify in any given unit what their programs consist of and what activities go on their forests.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanji, for providing that overview. And so I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to do that. And so next up, I've got just some photos here from the Bureau of Land Management. So Lee, would you mind sharing a
Yeah.
little bit more about this with us?
Yeah, happy to. So the BLM's a multi-use mandated agency, so we'll go into that a little bit more. Did you want to go through your slides and I can share mine?
You can take over screen sharing because I just have this one and
Oh, I thought there was the regions one, but maybe
and I
that.
do have a regional map here.
Yeah, so that's the BLM regions. We tend to actually operate more on a state by state basis. We're mostly in the 12 Western states, and then the Eastern states kind of gets lumped together. There's a couple other combinations like Oregon, Washington, but yeah, that's how the BLM's organized. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Somebody pointed out that I give hold music when I when I'm working on things. So we're gonna jump over here and share. And unfortunately, I was skipping ahead of my presentation, so give me 2 seconds to get back. Can you all see that all right?
Yeah.
Cool. So the overview of the BLM, like I said, we're a multi-use mandated agency. We oversee, BLM California oversees 15 million acres of public lands, 47 million acres of subsurface mineral estate, and 1.6 million acres of public lands in Northwest Nevada. When you actually expand that out to include all of BLM, it's about 10%. It's over 10% of the US landmass. So we're a massive agency as far as the land goes, but we hover right around 10,000 employees. So when you think about that ratio, we're actually a really tiny agency, and I like to think of us as the little agency that tries. So our mission, so the BLM's mission is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of public lands for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. So what does that actually look like? We have a bunch of different programs. When I move the little thing around your faces, does that, you all see that? Sorry, and I use Teams more than Zoom. Okay. So we have a conservation lands program. That's a major program out in California. We do renewable energy. We do oil and gas, which actually the BLM, after the IRS brings in the second amount of taxes, well, not taxes, but the second amount of revenue for the US government. So the BLM pays for the federal government. We do livestock. And again, massive economic benefit to the government and the public. Non-renewable mineral energies like gravel. We do recreation, including off-highway vehicle recreation, as well as more traditional like wilderness and wild and scenic-based recreation. Lots of oil, lots of gas, lots of money. We also have a ton of recreation that, again, provides an economic benefit. We're huge into renewable energy, including solar, especially down in the desert southwest of California, as well as expanding across other states. This is kind of the part that we're talking about. So BLM in California, we manage 356 miles of recreational rivers. So it's a pretty awesome resource. We do have a few trees, although the BLM tends to be more of a deserts and grassland type agency, lower elevation. But we do have some forest resources that are pretty cool, as well as some coastal areas. Part of our conservation lands and other programs, we have lots of recreational trails, like part of the Pacific Crest Trail, which you see here. And the BLM, like I said, we're a small agency as far as our workforce, but we rely heavily on volunteers and partnerships and youth to get our work done. So this is also a ploy to come help us out. All right. So that's all that I'm going to share right there, but we can go back and look at more stuff later. But that's a little bit about the agency. Basically, if there's anything you like to do, there's probably a job in the BLM where you can do that thing.
Cool. Thank you, Lee, for that nice rundown. And then here again, I got some fun photos from the Park Service of just different folks that RMS has worked with over the years or partnered with. And so just some fun photos here. But Hannah, I'm curious if you can give us maybe a little overview of just some of the programs. I mean, you don't have to go super in depth, but just like what some of the programs of interest might be for folks there. Because it's not just national parks all the time. You know, there's more to it in the Park Service than the parks themselves.
Yes, and that was definitely something that I learned too when I first started at the Park Service. You know, there are those wonderful magical parks that we all know and love, and the ones that come to mind when you think of the Park Service. And within those parks, there are a number of different positions. You know, it's not just rangers, there are scientists, historians, maintenance, you know, all kinds of things that parks require in order to maintain these spaces. So there's a lot of potential there in the parks themselves for interesting positions. And then kind of stepping back a little bit, there are national programs that support these parks. There's park planning and an Office of Outdoor Recreation who work on, you know, things that can benefit parks across the nation. At the Office of Outdoor Recreation, recently I've been working with them on looking at accessible recreation and making sure that spaces are accessible for folks with disabilities. And then in addition to that national scale, there are designated areas that are different than parks. There are national trails, there are heritage areas, and that's where Wild and Scenic Rivers falls. That's something Tangi's brought up a little bit, and also another program that BLM manages as well. So Wild and Scenic Rivers is a program that is managed by the 4 land managing agencies. And these rivers are designated by Congress to, protect these rivers in free-flowing condition. So there are a number of, actually most of the Wild and Scenic Rivers are within lands that federal agencies manage. But then there's a small subsection of rivers that run through areas that aren't managed by federal agencies. And this would be the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers. And these Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers flow through, could be your backyard. So a lot of the rivers there's a lot of these rivers in the Northeast in particular, and local councils that's made up of representatives from the towns that the river runs through, works on conservation and other programs to manage and maintain the river. So those are some of the nationally designated areas, and even within those programs, there's a number of different positions, whether that's recreation planners or scientists of different sorts or community planners. There's a lot of potential in those programs as well. And that's, you might be working in a larger region than you would in a park, or, there are different pros and cons to each. And then a last subsection of the Park Service is community assistance. And so this is primarily where I work now. And I think Partnership Rivers kind of falls under that program a little bit, I would say, because the Park Service helps these communities preserve their rivers. But this community assistance can be a number of different things. I'll give a shout out to Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance, which is our RTCA for short. You might see that acronym come up sometimes. They work on a number of different projects all around the country. Different organizations or municipalities apply for help building parks, trails, river access, you name it. They'll help you out with it. So that's, again, another realm that you can work in, and that offers that there's so many different kinds of positions within that part of the Park Service. You could be a landscape architect, you could be a natural resource specialist, a scientist, a community planner. So that's a great program as well that offers a lot of possibilities. And then the program that my fellowship is in is the Hydropower Assistance Program, which I mentioned a little bit before. And they provide assistance to communities who are, their rivers are being affected by hydropower plants. So making sure that those who are building hydropower plants do it in a way that's respectful of recreation, conservation, and providing, some level of support to the communities around those hydropower projects. So that's a little bit of the Park Service on a number of different scales, kind of going down from the parks to national and then to more local. So yeah, it's not just the Yosemite and Grand Canyon and the parks you know and love.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah, for that overview. And as Hannah mentioned, at least with like Wild and Scenic Rivers, there's 4 federal agencies that manage them. The last one that we haven't mentioned is the Fish and Wildlife Service. And yeah, just like a quick shout out, since I don't have someone here today to speak about them. I just wanted to point out, there's over 560 wildlife refuges in the National Wildlife Refuge System. They probably manage the least amount of wild and scenic rivers, but they certainly work with rivers that are not necessarily designated. They also co-manage waterways with some other federal agencies. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. And then, on top of that, we all know, maybe we don't all know, that was incorrect to say. There's other agencies that have jobs that could be related to rivers. So, like the Bureau of Reclamation or the USGS, US Geological Survey. So we're just kind of focusing on a few right now, but know that like each of these agencies, as Tangi mentioned, have their own missions. And are maybe organized slightly differently. So as you're out there job searching, it's going to be worth it to look into some of those differences and help you find your fit in a place that's going to be good for you. So. And I'm seeing awesome info and links being shared in the chat. So keep sharing that. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. Just kind of, shifting a little bit. There's always all these acronyms when working with a government agency, and these are just a couple that I pointed out, I wanted to point out, but there's a lot more. And as things come up, and any of you presenters have any that you want to highlight as well, this is certainly not an all exhaustive list. And so here we've got OPM, stands for the Office of Personnel Management. We'll go a little bit more into that here in a second. One you might see around job descriptions is KSAs, or the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Sometimes these are listed in like the qualifications, or might be things that you want to highlight in your federal resume. Hiring authorities, these are, do one of you want to try
I
it?
can talk
Yeah, I
about
was like,
that
you
a
might
little if you want me
actually
to.
explain it better. Yeah.
So we can go a little bit more in detail, but just real quick, there's a couple different hiring authorities. They're basically avenues in which to get hired. So our HR program has many different venues. So like if you're a veteran, you can get a hiring preference. If you're a recent grad, you can be hired through the recent grad program. If you work on like a youth crew out in, I want to say the desert, but it could be like any federal lands. There's the Public Land Corps Hiring Authority. If you get hired through that hiring authority after 640 hours, you can get picked up through that hiring authority. There's also the Resource Assistant Internship Program. There's different iterations, like Fish calls it the Direct Fellows Program. I think Forest Service also calls it the Resource Assistant Internship Program, and I don't know what the Park Service calls it, but there's all these different types of ways that you can get hired. So they're different hiring authorities. There's also like Schedule A and hiring opportunities for folks with disabilities. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of look at the different avenues and see how you can fit in them. And if you have more questions, I'm happy to chat about that.
Thanks, Lee. And then, yeah, GS, general schedule, you'll see, like, we'll kind of go through some things here. You'll see different GS levels. That's kind of the categories of experience and education. Non-competitive versus competitive is a way that a job can be categorized on the usajobs.gov that essentially is like saying, is it open to the public, or is it kind of reserved to maybe folks who are already hired within that land management agency or a land management agency or something like that. So yeah, this is oh, and I did get a question if this is going to be available, this recording. I am gonna send this out to everyone who registered. I'm gonna put this on YouTube. I'll also put all these links that are being shared in the description, so that way you don't have to like rush to like write something down and feel like you're gonna miss something. So I forgot to mention that earlier. Sorry about that. And then I also saw in the chat, Lee mentioned, if you have a science background, the Fish and Wildlife Service has a lot of positions in the 400 series. So in a federal job, federal jobs are very much categorized. Everything is unique cataloged, and they are all put into like this job series list, and they are all given a number. Here, I just highlighted a couple that might be of interest. But like as Lee mentioned, the back positions in the 400 series, that's going to be something that's natural resource management and biological science based. You've got some that are just general, and I'm going to put a link here into the chat. Oh, go over. you can go to the Office of Personnel Management website. They have a handbook on all these things, and we can talk about why it's useful here in a second, but I'm going to put this link in the chat. I mean, you can see here everything is this is for like all federal jobs, not just river related or land management related. And then they go even in further in detail, but for like the sake of conversation right now, you know, we've got like the park ranger series or the outdoor recreation planning series. And then if you click on this, it's going to open up a document that has a ton of information just related to this like job, right? And some of the different levels and what might be your responsibilities. So as you are looking through, you can kind of scroll down and see like, let's go. Okay. Like, what is the nature of the assignment at the GS5 level? Or what is your level of responsibility? And you'll notice that as the GS number goes up, you're kind of working your way up in the system. So you might have additional responsibilities. And I'm going to kind of pause and let like Lee, I know you've got some great slides and stuff. So yeah, go
I
ahead.
would just jump in and say, that's actually really, really key. A lot of positions are flown as ladder positions, you know, 5-7 positions or 5-7-9. That means basically if you complete a year successfully, the next year you're probably going to jump up to that next pay ladder. And again, after another year, you might jump up to the third. So that's really helpful to know that if GS5 is typically if you're coming right out of undergrad, GS7 is typically if you have that plus a year of experience. GS9 is typically where you would start with a master's degree or, you know, multiple years of experience. So it's a way of getting that pay without necessarily having that degree if you're able to find that latter position. It's also sometimes they'll ask you, do you want to apply to both a 5 and a 7? So by applying for both, you give yourself both levels. You give yourself the best chance to get hired. But then also if they come back with an offer, by knowing the OPM standards and the difference between how they rank a 5 and a 7 is how you can argue to get yourself bumped up to the higher pay. And we have successfully had some of my interns do that. So definitely good to know your OPM standards.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. And then I was just going to jump over next to USA Jobs. So this is USA Jobs. Sorry, this is from my prior example. You know, you're going to want to make an account. You're going to want to use their federal resume builder, and we can go more into that. Just real quick, I like to point out just on this main page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, they have a bunch of events as well that they put on that you can attend that are going to be not necessarily river specific, but might be specific towards applying to something on USA Jobs. So I always like to like scroll down, see what's coming up. Some of them are hosted by different agencies, you know, you can go to view more events and see some of the different recruitment sessions. So I just wanted to point that out and then come back. And then Lee, did you want to share some slides here?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. And sorry if I'm dominating, like feel free to let's see here. Replace current share. Sure. We can do that. Okay, we're gonna go back over to this presentation and share. Okay, so I'm happy to share these slides with the caveat that this is just my own personal advice to folks. In this presentation, I have information on like resumes and cover letters. Again, just my own personal preference of things. It does take me a while to share because I have to share it from my personal copy of it. And I only can do that from my computer, which I don't log into that very often. So we're gonna go down to USA Jobs section here and share. It switched screens. Hold on. Why did that go to my page? Give me 1 second. We're starting from this page. Okay, here we go. USA Jobs. So one thing that I want to point out, and I'll drop this link in the chat. is USA Jobs video tutorials. If you prefer your information via YouTube, there's like a whole thing. They're fire centric, but the information carries over. Like we talked about, there's so many different hiring authorities. This is where you can get more information on different types of avenues to get hired. Like you said, there's tons of events. So when you're applying for USA Jobs, one thing that you really want to do is you want to prove that you qualify by how you write your resume. So a USA Jobs resume is different than your typical public resume. That would be like around 1 to 2 pages. These resumes are going to be very, very detailed. So when you're applying, you have the opportunity to upload your resume to USA Jobs, and I'd say please don't do that. What you really want to do when you're first starting out is use their resume builder and then build your resume based on the assessment questionnaire. So you see this big giant blue apply button. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to scroll all the way down until you find it, and it's in different places, and sometimes it doesn't exist. So it's a fun little adventure. Under how to apply, typically you might find it there. There's like read more, and you have to expand that. And then you'll find this little unassuming link where it says to view a subsequent questionnaire, click here. And then you click there. That's when you get into the questions that you're actually going to be judged against. There's a couple different questions up in the beginning that are just like, do you qualify for the position either through hiring authorities or are you already a federal employee? All the different things. Then you get into a second set of questions that's about your experience. So there's going to be 2 different types of questions. There's going to be best describes, which means choose one answer. And there's going to be the other ones that say select all that apply. And that's going to be the more that you can click, the better. But you have to prove it in your resume. So like that's what they're going to be looking at is how you answer these questions and then looking at your resume to see how it actually lines up. So when you go through here, that's where you find all of your keywords. So if you're looking at this, this question here, choose all that apply. Basically, all of the things in red would be like you were wanting to select them and then prove how you have those things. So here I selected like keywords like plan, conduct public meetings, facilitate. And those are things that you may not put in your resume. Like you may not put team building in your resume or problem solving, like those keywords in your resume, right? So for your USA Jobs resume, you want to figure out how to work those in. So if you want to be like uber nerdy about it, I literally take all these questions and I highlight all the keywords and then I keep adding them into how I have those experience until I've checked all of the keywords. It's arduous, but it helps and it can make the difference. So definitely, yeah, use resume builder if you can. And this is just more examples that you can find. So I'm going to stop sharing there and turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Lee. Yeah, so here, let's just say, just to show you one more time, because it does vary where this link exists. And I've searched around, and then again, maybe it doesn't exist depending on the position. There was one where I was reading recently, and it was about, instead you had to do like a cover letter, and you had to, provide a copy of your transcript and things like that versus one of these. So for the sake of demonstration and just to show it again, so like I was looking at one of those job series. I just chose 0025 Park Ranger just because I know I was looking earlier and I know that there's some jobs open right now in this. And let's say coming down here, Park Ranger. No, okay, coming down. This one is not necessarily open to civilians, so I might stop right there unless I'm someone who qualifies here. But say I did, I'd keep going down, keep going down. Okay, I'm keeping my eye out for this link. And of course, you want to read all this stuff. I recommend it. Let's see if this one has it. How you will be evaluated. I bet I chose one that might not. Oh, how to apply. Read more. There we go. The questionnaire. And when you're logged out with like, right now I'm not logged into usajobs.gov, so this is going to be a preview. It's nice to see that, like Lee mentioned, you can go in, tailor that resume to be like hitting all of these points that they're asking in the questionnaire. The questionnaire is going to vary depending on the job, so not all questionnaires are the same. Keep that in mind too. And how many different resumes? I think you can have like 5 different resumes within the system.
Yeah, a bunch. I don't remember. I've hit the limit, but yes, a lot.
Okay. So, yep, and then here's your questionnaire. The first, some of the first questions are just around being eligible. Do you, are you a veteran, or how are you going to verify this? And then you kind of get down to these assessment of the qualifications, and some of them are really long. And like Lee mentioned, you want to go through, you want to essentially make sure that you have these words and that you're hitting these qualifications. And you don't want to lie, but you want to make sure that you're being as specific as possible. So just to kind of demonstrate that again.
And I would say that again, I've had folks that are like, oh, well, it says I'm an expert in this and I don't have 30 years of experience on this. And so I'm not an expert. And I'm like, it's a GS5, it's an entry level position. Are you an expert for somebody that is applying for an entry level position? As in, if you have a degree in a relevant subject, you are an expert in that. So again, don't lie, but like, don't be overly harsh on yourself. Look at what it is that they're asking. Does that help? I hope so.
I think that's a great note, Lee. And yeah, the way I think about it is if you can think of an anecdote to demonstrate some level of competency in that area, then you could probably select nearly the highest form of experience there. I mean, if you don't have any anecdotal experience at all, then maybe you're going to need to mark something that reflects that. But yeah, I really like what Lee said. Don't assume that you need to have 30 years of experience to select that you are highly competent at what you do.
Great points. And I was also going to just add, that if you're just starting out in your school and you're still like, this might be a couple years off for you, you can also look at the positions that you might be interested in having in the future and then work towards building experience in some of these qualifications, whether that's through a school project or a class or things like that. Or it might even just help you like kind of like note those things down as you're doing them, so you don't have to go back a couple years later and try to remember, what did I exactly do? What was that called? So it's a way to both kind of see like where do you want to go to and what might be those qualifications and requirements.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Lee. Oh, okay. Well, so I like what you mentioned, Angie, about sort of scoping out the playing field and getting a better feel for some of the skill sets that are required for some of this work. I also wanted to highlight something that is available to students that can help develop personal relationships with your potential employers or different units that you might be interested in working on in the future in different parts of the country or for different agencies. And it's called the Virtual Student Federal Service Internship. I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. And essentially, these are informal agreements. It's unpaid, but it's like kind of like adding an extra class, say, an additional project to your workload as a student. And what you do is you get paired with a staff who has some kind of virtual work for you to accomplish. Although that relationship could be built to the degree that if you're nearby, you could meet up in person or explore other enrichment opportunities. And so if you want to get a better feel for some of these jobs and get more familiar with what the needs of different agencies and programs are, I really recommend the Virtual Student Federal Service Program. And I do know of a number of folks who built relationships to the degree that they were looking for their name in the applications, or they recommended them for different positions. So that's a place you can do some learning and some scoping when you're still a student.
And I'll add to that too, like I think in addition to that program, which is a really great was a great one to get to know some of this work. I think fellowships have been really, really instrumental for me in getting to know this work better. And I think it allows you to kind of test out different aspects of this work. And allows you to learn more about the federal agency that you're working within. And there's a number of different kinds of fellowships, both in subject, agency, length of time. Like there's some summer fellowships. Mine is a bit longer. Both my fellowships have been year long. That comes with Public Land Corps hiring authority too. So there's other perks to fellowships or some of these other programs that come before federal service if that's what you're looking for. So I'll also stay open to those as well.
Awesome. Well, I think my last slide here is just we've got some time for questions, or if there's anything else people wanted to highlight. Fun photo of my dog. So yeah, I know that there's been a lot of great information shared in the chat too. So trying to see if I've missed anything, or if anyone else has something that they'd like to add.
I can expand on the fellowship opportunity piece that Hannah was referencing. And so for the Forest Service specifically, also shout out Jackie, shout out Hispanic Access Foundation, because that's where I found my inlet and opportunity with the Forest Service. But with the Forest Service, we have a program called the Resource Assistance Program. It's an internship, it's a fellowship, I don't know. But this comes with a specific hiring authority called Direct Hire Authority. And so after you complete your assistantship with a given Forest Service staff, there comes opportunity to apply for jobs where your credentials would be reviewed. The job opportunity would be closed to the public. And if after navigating the HR piece of things and the administrative side of things, you qualify, you've built a relationship with those who are part of the hiring team, you can be quote unquote directly hired into that position. And that really is the goal for those positions, is to train folks up to do meaningful work with the Forest Service, high level work that translates approximately to an entry-level position of the 5, 7, 9, or higher if you have a master's degree or otherwise. And that is the program that I found opportunity and success in. So I just wanted to highlight that inlet as well.
There are so many people who have been hired from fellowships, I think, and at least who I've met, and we're all hoping to follow in their footsteps.
Well, on that note, I've helped 22 interns get hired permanently. So if you all want help, reach out. I'm happy to try to help.
That's incredible, Lee. That's amazing.
Well, and I have a new batch of resource assistant interns this year. So hopefully my number will go up in a few weeks or months, depending on timeline.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Couple other programs I just want to mention, and I'm not as much of an expert in them, but at least I could share the names and you can do a little more research into them. But one is if you're trying to transition into a new career, maybe you've been working in something in a different industry for several decades, but now you're wanting to transition towards a career in river management or something like that, or related to rivers, you might want to look at the National Park Service has an experienced workers program. There's also, I know that they like hire on people to help with different jobs, and it could be anything like, um, it could be anything. You know, I've worked with a few of their experienced workers, one who did come in from like I think like a publishing background and like a editor in book publishing, and then another one who worked more with nonprofits and river conservation. So there's different avenues. Also, the U.S. Forest Service has an enterprise program, is what it's called, and it's almost kind of like a contractor type thing. Tangi, you might be able to explain it better than I can, but I know that they have some different types of jobs. It's a little bit different outside of the Forest Service, and I don't know if actually their jobs are available on usajobs.gov or not, but
Yeah, I would need to do some follow-up to get additional clarity on that, but I think you did a nice job highlighting our relationship with them, Angie.
yeah. So just like more avenues out there, you know, it's like we've always heard of like the classic, like go work at as a park ranger for the Park Service type of thing, but there's so many different ways and so many different jobs that you can get involved with one of these federal agencies. And then on top of that, there's also state and local agencies that have their own processes as well. But
Yeah, that's a good point too, Angie. I mean, collectively, the work around waterways and rivers is done through a huge network of partnerships. And federal agencies play a unique role in that, and so do our partners. So whichever direction you go, and whatever your primary filter is for figuring out what kind of work you really want to do as you get started, asking who does what in this big network of relationships, it can really help put the puzzle pieces together. Because like Angie is mentioning, like there's this on the ground aspect of working with these incredible resources, but there's like a strategic side of things. There's an administrative piece, there's a scientific piece, there's a community engagement and justice piece, there's a historic and cultural piece to this work, and maybe the subject of fascination is rivers or waterways. But yeah, get to know whoever you can, ask who they work with and how they work with them to accomplish a number of goals that we collectively have for these places, and that will get you pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, and there's a number of, I mean, there's so many ways to approach this work too, as Tandy is saying. And I know USA Jobs can be very intimidating, and making sure you have all your keywords in the right order and resumes and all of this stuff. But I think there are I think there's so much work that needs to be done, and there are a number of positions in these federal agencies, and there's fellowships which don't live on USA Jobs, and there's different ways to sort through USA Jobs. But I think all in all, I think we want to give the advice that it's not as intimidating as it seems, and is more approachable. And I think any way that you can get involved is really helpful.
Well, thank you all again so much. There's been a lot of great information and tips shared today. We have a couple more minutes, but I do want to just highlight our next session is going to be on September 25th, and this one is going to be around how the power of networking and professional development through attending conferences or joining professional associations or groups. So we're going to highlight maybe some key events or organizations that you can leverage or get involved with. And that are related to rivers or conservation or all the different ways. There's like millions. And it'll also just kind of be like a big sharing session too. So if any of you have some, I'm thinking of like maybe we can have like a collaborative document where we can like list all of these out and have that at the end or something like that. So and lastly, I'm going to put a little, let's see, I got a link for a survey today. Just would love to hear your thoughts on this session. This is like an ongoing, this is like maybe the third or fourth year I've been working on this series, and Tangi's helped a bunch, Lee's helped, Hannah, thank you so much for helping this year. And it's ever evolving, and I'm just trying to kind of, make sure we're hitting the topics that are important to people. So I'd love to hear any feedback you have. I'll also send out the link in the follow-up email along with the recording, all the info and resources shared in the chat and all of that. So let me just hit the link because I can't talk and do that at the same time. Okay, here we go. So unless there's any last questions or any last thoughts, just want to thank everyone again for joining and reach out. Yeah, if you have any questions that come up. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angie.
Mhm.